Good day, Patriots. Welcome to another Literate Patriot podcast episode. Sorry for the brief hiatus. Let's get right into it. As the only sane person interested in working with all people in government, Governor from Ohio John Kasich probably doesn't stand a chance. During an interview with Stephen Colbert, Kasich explained the difficulty of running against what he called the, quote, cleverness of sound bites, end quote. Then continued, quote, especially when those sound bites are designed to attack others, end quote. Lacking attacks or anger-stoking words, Kasich is left only with a conservative record of experience that denotes strong judgment. When has that ever meant anything? Something else that seemed to mean nothing, Kasich's inarguable, authentic conversation with Anderson Cooper and interested voters during CNN's GOP town hall on the 18th of February 2016. By comparison, the non-answers, inarticulate statements, deep disrespect of voters, he is the only candidate, Republican or Democrat, to sit while taking questions from the public of Donald Trump, resonated deeply and ignited the passions of the 81% of Republicans who, when voting, aligned themselves as more conservative. Thanks, South Carolina. Kasich has, throughout this campaign, demonstrated amazing grace, despite the fact that news outlets gave him no coverage. It's so bad that almost no one can pronounce this poor man's name. Kasich, it rhymes with basic. But as I was saying, none of that seems to matter. The literal reality that actual Republican candidate Donald Trump was only asked questions about controversies rather than about ideology or policy, while Governor meaning government experience, Governor John Kasich was asked and answered questions about his plans for health care, his ideology on the Supreme Court and Supreme Court nominations, his ability to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats and independents, the responsibility he feels towards the electorate, and helping the working poor, all delivered authentically, coupled with an on-the-ground Kasich campaign equaled 7.6% of votes, totaling a proud 0 delegates. 0. That's a strong number. That's a number you can grow with and campaign on. Kasich's only hope is that South Carolina was an anomaly. With Nevada just on the horizon, moderate Republicans are Kasich's only hope. And so, they are our only hope. No matter where you are, caucus strong. Moving on to our second story, on Thursday the 18th of February 2016, The Nation published a great article titled, quote, How Wall Street Reform Could Give Low-Income Families a Big Boost, end quote. Now, I won't discuss the entire article, but in the article cites statistics that are as disheartening and deflating as they are more important than ever. As high information and low information voters compete for what America is and should be, knowing that, quote, the billionaires on the Forbes 400 list now own about as much wealth as the entire African American plus more than a third of the U.S. Latino population combined, end quote, is good to consider. The article continues that even with campaigns to raise the living wage, Americans could, quote, still find their hard-earned savings wiped out by another financial crisis, end quote. The housing bubble, the sky-high gas prices, the Beanie Babies craze. Okay, so maybe the Beanie Babies craze wasn't based on mega bank speculation, but sky-high gas prices and the housing bubble were definitely the fault of large banks. As the campaign season rolls on, voters need to ask themselves how great our equality is when so many are classed as, quote, working poor. How can this even be a category applicable to millions of citizens in the wealthiest nation on earth, in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world? How great are we, nation building and protecting the citizens of the world, as our neighbors are starving, That was the question this article forced the electorate to confront. And now, in 2016, the electorate seems hungry for change, almost desperate for it. I caution the angry, especially those full of hatred of others, to take a step back. Let's just be real for a second. The quote-unquote Mexicans are not streaming across the border like lemmings over a cliff or like water over Niagara. A Muslim with a bomb is not hiding behind every corner or waiting for every innocuous family function to slaughter your great aunt. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts is a conservative, not a liberal. ISIL is not hiding off of the East Coast in submarines. Planned Parenthood uses no federal funding for abortions. No federal funding for abortions. Abortions are legal. And finally, it's okay to want someone who's not part of the establishment or part of the Washington, D.C. machine. But my God, they should have some government experience. Can I get 2 years of government experience? So what does John Kasich's abysmal record of South Carolina have to do with the disappearing wealth of American families? Everything. Republicans are displeased with President Obama for whatever reason, based in facts or because they're the low information voter. People are looking for radical change, and people are willing to turn to the most extreme demagogue who provides not answers, but funny quips and attacks against everybody. He who shall not be named has a lack of shame, a disregard for the people, a disregard for the Constitution, a disregard for the precedents that have been set in the United States that should scare everybody, not just liberals, not just moderates. They should scare even the conservative voter. But that's not what's happening. When you have a man like Governor Kasich, who was able to reach across the aisle successfully, not just in his state of Ohio, but in Washington, D.C., when you have a man like Governor Kasich who was able to balance the budget in Washington, D.C., when you have a man like Governor Kasich who accepted the Affordable Care Act package that allowed him to expand health care in his state, something that almost no Republican governors did, and when you have a man like Governor Kasich who won second place in New Hampshire, and he was not able to successfully carry that momentum into South Carolina, what does that say about the state of our country? How did the United States become so divided, and when will the United States be united again? This election truly is a turning point. The time for talking points is ending. The time to discuss the deeper issues, the deeper factions within this United States is coming to a head. This idea that because he who shall not be named has been in this race for so long and is making these jokes and people are laughing at him, this does not normalize him as a candidate. Donald Trump is not a Republican contender. He's a demagogue. He's a fascist. And when you have legitimate Republicans, not ideologues like Ted Cruz, who would never dream of working across the aisle, but would rather halt all government functions until they get their way. When you have inauthentic people like Marco Rubio, I can almost understand it in those examples, people turning towards a candidate like Trump, if for nothing other than the authenticity, despite the fact that he has no record of governing experience, despite the fact that he hasn't been able to give any details about any of his policies, besides the fact that he can't speak articulately about anything that he would do, and that everything about anything that he says or anything that he writes or produces or the controversies that he creates are all relegated to and are all talking points. I can see why people would do that. When you have a legitimate Republican candidate who has a legitimate campaign, and there's nothing negative that people can find to say about him other than the typical negative things that people can say about a candidate, and this candidate is struggling, well, then that begs the question, what does that say about the state of our democracy? When wealth is increasingly concentrated at the top, when we have an entire sector of our population relegated as the working poor in the wealthiest country on earth, when laws are passed that can just be eroded at the state level, what does that say about the state of the democracy in which we live? What does that say? And so that's it for this podcast episode of The Literate Patriot. Just wanted to give you patriots something to think about until the next episode. If you like what you hear, subscribe. Follow The Literate Patriot on Twitter @LiteratePatriot. For extra content, visit the YouTube channel by searching The Literate Patriot, or check out www.literatepatriot.com. For these links and the links to the articles and resources used in the making of this podcast, check out the description. Until next time, Patriots.